Hello, this is Rob. With me is Matt. We're talking about the election. How you doing, Matt?
I'm okay. I'm a little bit feeling a little bit under the weather today, but other than that, ready to do it.
Really? I mean, you're what, sinus infection or something like that, or is it
No, it's
stomach,
one of those
flu?
random sort of unidentifiable things that one of my kids brought home from school.
I mean, there's nothing. Kids are just so unacceptable these days with the diseases that they have. So we have this thing called an election coming up, and we're mostly going to talk about that, but we're also going to talk about Benghazi and a couple other things. I mean, you're sort of in the epicenter. I'm in the provinces, the heartland, as I believe at some point you previously suggested.
The heartland, yes.
The heart of the heartland, where the bourbon flows. Interestingly enough, in Kentucky, they give everyone so there's actually this it's quite a catch-22. They give everyone the day off, businesses are closed, and you can't buy alcohol before 6 o'clock. I mean, really, we have a free day and it's completely wasted if you didn't go out and stock up heavily on alcohol the day before and then start drinking at 8 a.m. when you wake
in
up.
fairness, they're not asking you to think that far ahead, but still, I understand.
Right. Right. The thing is, like, lots of beer, lots of bourbon, everything the night before, and then it's a lovely morning, and everybody passes out by 7 o'clock. Anyway, but we haven't really been touched by the campaign here. Joe Biden was here for the debate, but Obama hasn't visited, and Romney hasn't visited. And basically, unless you can get a Cincinnati station, you don't even know that there's an election going on. But you're in the epicenter. You're in this place where elections actually happen. What is your sense of what's going on right now in this electoral world?
Well, my sense right now is, Obama is doing pretty well in the polls. I think he'll pull it out. It's not a sure thing by any means. But again, a lot of the factors point to that, and I have watched with great amusement and entertainment the conservative outrage machine against Nate Silver. Now, with sympathy to Nate, I mean, it's his turn. To be lunch, apparently.
But Matt, you have to preface that the effeminate Nate Silver, right? If you preface it that way, then you're biased.
Yeah, right. Nate having the absolute temerity to apply math to figuring out to predict the way that elections will turn out, and we know that science does have a liberal bias. So that's basically, it's kind of the latest permutation of the conservative attack that came up a few months ago, which was that there was this vast conspiracy of pollsters to create the illusion that Obama was winning and thereby depress conservative voter turnout.
Right. My favorite, it has been utterly fascinating to me, especially because I'm taking a statistics course right now, and so I'm sort of reconnecting with all this stat stuff. I mean, it's probably a biased statistics course because it's at a university, and so probably I'm learning democratic statistics and liberal statistics rather than possibly even, and I should ask actually this question in the next class: are we learning socialist statistics or just liberal statistics? But anyway, so I think that Matt Iglesias had a really good way of turning the phrase. He said, he did not expect the conservative war on the central limit theorem. The central limit theorem is a statistical law that, samples are normally distributed, and therefore we can draw inferences towards the population from multiple samples. And it's just utterly remarkable to me the number of people who should know better, right? I mean, people who, and let's be clear here, because as you pointed out at the beginning, this election is not in the bag for Obama. Obama is in the Electoral College, by the polling we have extant, ahead, right? He is likely to win an Electoral College victory based on the polling that exists right now. Accumulated from all of the different firms when you take all of the different firms into account. And this isn't just Silver, this is other pollsters as well. But he's not certain, right? 2 states could turn, and they're close enough that they could turn, and you would have a Mitt Romney victory. So it's not the most surprising thing that would happen next Wednesday. We wake up to President-elect Romney. But the unwillingness of so many conservatives and again, smart people, to accept just that sort of very baseline argument, right? And I mean, I think Silver's a sports guy, and so he's made, that Mitt Romney has as much chance right now as a team that's down by 3 with 3 minutes left in the fourth quarter. And that doesn't sound so bad, right? You would rather be ahead, but it doesn't sound so bad.
Right.
But the unwillingness to accept and the willingness to embrace figures like Dick Morris, who are saying that not only is it going to be a Romney victory, it's going to be a Romney landslide. That he's going to take Oregon and he's going to take New Jersey, and these states which haven't been in play for 20 years.
Right.
It's truly remarkable to me.
That's the beauty of the kind of wingnut mindset, though, right? Because when Dick Morris is proven absolutely wrong, it's clearly because liberals did something fishy.
Right. Well, yeah, and with this particular argument is extremely convenient, right? Because if you want to say that Nate Silver is lying to depress conservative turnout and therefore fudging the polls, if Romney wins, then Nate Silver was lying. Right. If Obama wins, then Nate Silver lied successfully.
Because all of those conservatives who constantly refresh the New York Times website and read 538, that's where they're getting their voting. Get out the vote information.
They were so bitterly disappointed in the likelihood that Obama was going to win that they didn't even bother to vote. You know what's interesting though, and there was a post about this a couple days ago, that if you ask the question, who do you think will win in swing states and pretty much everywhere else, and this is not really reflected in conservative elite opinion, but the number comes down to something like 65-30. That people believe Obama will win at a much greater rate than they plan to vote for Obama, which is very interesting, right? Because on one hand, it may indicate that Silver's perfidious efforts have worked, but on the other hand, it may indicate that not everybody who plans to vote for Mitt Romney is drinking the Kool-Aid on this one. That there are a lot of people who feel it's their duty to go and vote and want to vote for Mitt Romney, but feel that Mitt Romney isn't quite likely to win, which is, from my point of view, entirely reasonable. So I wrote this post proposing 3 reasons why we have this phenomenon, this war against averages, this war against statistics. And the first one was that people generally believe this stuff, right? That it is such a paranoid mindset that they really believe that every pollster except for Rasmussen and occasionally Gallup, depending on what Gallup polls show that day, are simply lying to them for this media bias. And the second is that it's a cheerleading function, right? That they understand themselves to be cheerleaders. They understand that they're down, but they're going to put the best face on it so that people don't get depressed, right? And that's I should point out that is entirely reasonable. That is entirely rational, and it's arguably more rational than the way that liberals dealt with the immediate aftermath of the first debate, right? Where, I think Andrew Sullivan, he had the noose, it was around his neck, and, he was kicking the chair, he couldn't quite...
well, no, it's like Kevin Drum wrote about the hat gap. I think that was really right on.
Right. Well, I mean, it goes beyond the hat gap, right? Because, liberals, I don't even think were reacting rationally after the first debate. I mean, there was sort of generally, oh my God, it's turning around and we're going to lose 4% a day, from here, and Romney's going to win with 92% of them. But anyway, I exaggerate for effect. But anyway, that this is a rational approach, and arguing that Mitt Romney still has a fantastic chance and he is likely to win, just sort of enforces conservative turnout. And the third is, something that comes to me from studying the literature on sort of why German and Japanese soldiers in World War II kept fighting so fanatically and effectively after it was clear that their countries were losing the war. And it's not about winning the war, it's about positioning yourself for post-war. Yeah. That, being able to go back to your village and say, no, I really fought as hard as I could against the Russians. And, even in a losing cause, and, so now, elect me, Burgermeister or something like that. And so that's what's going on here. People are positioning themselves for a post-election reality in conservative punditry. I don't know. I mean, what do you think about any of that?
Well, I find the latter explanation really interesting, just because I mean, one thing we do, or I observe, and I think it's pretty clear about the conservative movement, is that they are pretty harsh in policing their own. I mean, remember this, at the end of the 2008 campaign, when it seemed very likely McCain was going to lose, and there were lots of conservative pundits and lots of anonymous leaks coming out of the McCain campaign about what a nightmare Sarah Palin was. You know, there was this real effort by the soldiers, the real ideological soldiers of the conservative movement, like Red State, and some of these others, saying, we will remember those of you who did not keep the faith with our Sarah Palin, and you will pay, or some variation on that. And so that makes sense to me. That's just kind of, that sort of mentality is, I think, baked in to the conservative movement as it is today. But as to the point about, you know, it being rational for all of these conservative writers to continue to spin, you know, this story of a coming Romney victory, you know, I guess it depends. I mean, what is your role? I mean, or how does one envision themselves, as a journalist or a pundit or as an activist? And now, granted, in our modern media age, a lot of those roles are, the lines between those roles are not often clear. Right. So I'm not really sure how I come to. I mean, I certainly recognize that as a conservative, as someone who is interested in the advancement of the conservative project, one would see it as rational to ignore, contradicting information and continue to write as if Romney is going to win, and that's the reality. Right. I'm not comfortable with that. It's not something I would do personally, but you know, I understand why people do it.
I mean, it's one way to sort of think about this distinction, and going back to what Drama suggests, the hat cap may actually be applicable in this particular situation, is the distinction between Jennifer Rubin and Ezra Klein, right? That I mean, Ezra has been, scrupulously fair about, to my views, about assessing the chances for this election, and Jennifer Rubin. Again, people are going to be, on watch to see what happens to her on Wednesday. Yeah. There's going to be a lot of concern out there from what she's written if Romney doesn't win. And they work for the same organization, and they sort of. I don't even know how the Washington Post thinks about the distinction. I don't know whether Fred Hyatt thinks of Ezra Klein and Jennifer Rubin as equivalents. I don't. It's hard for me to wrap my mind around that. So,
I think that comparison is probably really unfair to Ezra. I mean, we both know Ezra's background. He's right. He's coming from, I think, originally a more liberal perspective, but, he doesn't describe, he said in an interview, Alec McGillis wrote a piece a few weeks ago for the New Republic where Ezra just doesn't even describe himself as a liberal anymore. He's interested in data. One can quibble with that, but all of that to say that I think that comparison is not quite fair. I think a better comparison might be to Greg Sargent and Jennifer Rubin, but even that is unfair to Greg Sargent, who's just far more responsible and far less of just Jennifer Rubin, and I think even conservatives will acknowledge this, is simply an appendage of the Romney campaign, in a way that Greg Sargent really, even though Greg writes from a liberal progressive perspective, I mean, he's critical of the left, and I think he writes, from an evidence-based standpoint in a way that you just cannot say Rubin ever done.
Right. No, and Rubin has come under a lot of criticism for conservatives, especially during the primary campaign, for being, just exactly what you suggest, nothing but a mouthpiece for Romney. And, again, I would say more broadly that it's actually pretty irresponsible for the Post to have someone like that on staff under the Washington Post. But, that's probably a conversation for a different time. So we had to bet on it. If I had to bet on it, which, if I had any money, I might, I would bet on Obama winning with somewhere close to 295 electoral votes. Be a long evening. The Democrats, and this seems more certain, and even not many Republicans are now arguing. Dick Morris says that the Republicans are going to win 7 Senate seats, but not many Republicans are actually even arguing anymore that the Republicans are going to take the Senate. So, it is extremely unlikely on Wednesday that we will wake up and we will find unified Republican government. It is probably just as unlikely that we'll wake up and find unified Democratic government unless something wonky happens in the House. The House is harder to predict, but it's unlikely. We will probably have divided government with probably Obama and probably a Democratic Senate and probably a Republican House, but possibly a Romney president. So you have been in D.C. during one of these transitions before. I can only assume at your institution that they are stocking up on boiling oil, and you guys are getting ready to tear the copper wire out of the walls and so forth. I mean, what does a transition like this? Now obviously there's talking about a transition if Obama wins. If Romney wins, what does life look like in your little sector of the world over the next 4 months?
Well, it's interesting because I've only been here, I came to D.C. in 2007, so I've only been here through one transition. So I have, little firsthand experience to compare it to. But I came to the Center for American Progress in February of 2008, so I was there during the election and then during the transition and since then. So if Romney wins, I mean, I'd say we will probably get a good number of exiting Obama administration people, researchers, fellows, etc., coming to or affiliating with the center in some way. And the center will go back to being more of an opposition engine, obviously. I mean, and at the same time, I think you'll see organizations like AEI, the American Enterprise Institute, and Heritage becoming much more prominent by virtue of their connections with the Romney team and a likely Romney administration, as we did with George W. Bush, various fellows and analysts from those organizations going into the administration, and those organizations benefiting from the close relationship with those people, as the center has, I think, its profile was greatly elevated by the relationships that existed between various members of the Obama team and the center.
Right. So, basically, I guess one way to think about this is that if you were just sort of now getting into the liberal policy game on the policy wonkish side, you really have to cheer for an Obama victory, because if you don't, the job market's going to be saturated by people coming out of the administration.
I think that's probably safe to say.
Right. Whereas, on the other side, the job market is going to be much more amenable if Romney wins, right? And so, which is interesting, right? Because it almost should be the opposite, right? That opposition should produce more and more interesting sort of oppositional work. But
actually, now that I was just going to kind of amend that to say exactly what you just said. I think we could see. A Romney victory could produce a greater willingness on larger donors and foundations on the progressive side being willing to support a lot more work, policy work, etc. To maintain a running critique of a Republican administration. I mean, that's basically where the Center for American Progress was founded. I mean, because there was a recognition among a group of progressives that there was very little in terms of a policy infrastructure to combat the Bush administration. So yeah, it's likely we could see that too. So it's not as easy to say that it'll be a tougher job market. I think it will be a little tougher for liberal analysts, but there could be a proliferation of organizations, which I think would be a good thing.
Right.
Certainly wouldn't outweigh the bad of a Romney administration, but
right. In my own existence as me qua blogger, I would expect if Romney wins that the traffic for lawyers, guns, and money will be higher over the next 4 years than if Obama wins. That does not justify a Romney victory, but it allows us to go back and take sort of a much more oppositional stance. And it's much more fun to write oppositionally rather than sort of defensively, and it's much more interesting, and people are more willing to read it, and people get more excited, and so And I think that people have made a lot of observations like that about the liberal blogosphere, that
Yeah.
the liberal blogosphere really benefits from having a Republican president. So we didn't talk about this subject in the intro, but I'm curious if you have just like one or two quick thoughts on it. Every day when I turn around, and I think Lawyers Against Money is particularly sensitive to these, and we have sort of developed a reputation for being sensitive to these kinds of critiques. Every day you turn around, and it seems to me there's a new article on Salon or The Guardian or somewhere else about why progressives shouldn't vote for Obama, right? And sort of even in the last week, you've had Matt Stoller and David Sirota. You have sort of a continuous drumbeat from Glenn Greenwald, not exactly making that argument, but pretty much making that argument. I mean, why is there? And I should also almost all of these articles are prefaced with I'm telling unpleasant truths that can't really be told in the liberal media, and they're writing with a prominent headline at Salon or a prominent headline at some other major, or Drew Weston, right, who's writing in the New York Times, but or writing in the Nation or whatever else. Why is there such a market for these kinds of articles about sort of why progressives should hate the Democrats? Do you have any sense at all? And I know, like I said, we didn't prep that. But.
I really wish I had something witty and on point here. I really don't know. I mean, I don't know whether there's something just baked into the progressive mentality that kind of rewards or produces or generates this sort of self-flagellation. To me, it seems pretty clear that if you believe, which of these candidates is going to do better advancing your values? I mean, that's not a tough call.
Right.
Even if you want to say which of these candidates, election or re-election, is going to be better for your values in the longer run, that's not tough at all either. Now, I think you can make all kinds of criticisms about Obama, whether on the economy, whether on his failure to really reorganize the financial system, really hold Wall Street's feet to the fire. In our area on drones, I think, particularly drones, detainees, but I think drones is definitely one area where progressives have really failed. I mean, that's not all progressives. Many have monitored this very well, but I think nothing like you would have seen under a Bush or any conservative Republican administration. So yes, there are critiques to be made, but I see all of that as kind of like, okay, we've got our work cut out for us as progressives under the next Obama administration if he is reelected.
Right.
I mean, not to change the subject, but I did want to mention this too. I think this is one of the things that I do look forward to. I don't know if look forward is the right term, but if Obama is reelected, progressives really starting to get their act together as a movement around some of these national security questions. I mean, recognizing that a lot of this stuff, these decisions are very difficult, partly just because they're difficult, say on detainees, say on drones, but also because of the architecture that was bequeathed to the Obama administration by the Bush administration that is difficult to unravel. But having said all of that, I do very much hope that progressives will have the opportunity to pressure the next Obama administration on some of these questions to do a better job creating what I think is a more durable, legal, and acceptable constitutional architecture for some of these things.
Right. Right. I mean, I wonder if it's, sometimes it feels like a sort of an emotional enthusiasm issue, right? That it's just so much easier to be enthusiastic and emotional and acceptable, right? There's nothing wrong with wanting to be enthusiastic about being in opposition. That makes it more entertaining, fun. Outrage, indignation, these things are entertaining in some important way. Right. Anyway, well, I mean, we should, there's going to be this election. It's going to happen no matter what we say about it. But there was an article last night that especially made the foreign policy Twitterverse explode about Benghazi, about what happened in Benghazi. And in fairness, Benghazi has been sort of a developing story for a while. I haven't paid as close attention to it as I should for a variety of reasons. But to my understanding of this Wall Street Journal article, and we should also add that our mutual friend and associate acquaintance, Eli Lake, has been doing a lot of work on this on this particular issue.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, so to my understanding, the Wall Street Journal article last night, and some people are characterizing it as it throws David Petraeus under the bus, but it brought up questions about the CIA's role in responding to the initial reports of the attack, right?
Right.
And you may have a better sense of what exactly the argument was, but it brought up significant questions about the CIA and also sort of Petraeus directly and how they responded to these attacks. I mean, so did you read the article? Do you have thoughts on it?
I did. Basically, it just talked about an arrangement, a secret to many people, an arrangement between the State Department and the CIA, that the CIA would provide security for Benghazi, or be on call to show up when security was needed, and they took as long as they did to show up, or there was basically a breakdown in communication. The CIA wasn't on the same page as the State Department in terms of what they were expected to do and when. That's as I understand it. And then of course there's the conversation, the arguments about the timelines. When did they show up? How long did this fighting go on? Where were all these other, could the administration or anyone have called in other military support that could have stopped this or made it go another way? I think Media Matters had a thing today with Geraldo Rivera on Fox and Friends in the morning. And Geraldo, who has been pushing this as hard as anyone, but who really took it to the Fox and Friends hosts, I think rightly, for the way they, he basically divided up, and I can't believe I'm citing Geraldo Rivera as an authority here, but no, I mean, I think what he said made a lot of sense. He's like, there's basically three parts of it. One is, why was security as lax as it was leading up to it? Two, what happened during the fighting? And three, the aftermath with the administration's various stories about what was going on as the intel came in. And he was saying 1 and 3 are fine to talk about and ask questions about, but the central thing, this claiming that the Obama administration has, personal responsibility for President Obama for the death of these Americans, for not calling in support. He could have done this, he could have done that. He just really took it to these guys, saying, I mean, this is just atrocious to be putting it in these terms, and I think that's more or less correct. I think one can make criticism, one can ask questions. Okay, where did we have other, were there planes that could have come, were there drones that could have come and, launched a missile against some of these guys who were attacking the consulate and the annex later. But it's just amazing when you look at the way that this has been. And I'm not someone who is against politicizing national security. I actually had this conversation with David Gartenstein-Ross a few weeks ago. I think claims of politicizing national security are largely BS most of the time.
National security is political. Yeah,
it is political. We're going to argue about it. We're going to, but I think there is a line here. And I think the Republicans have clearly, or many Republicans, I'm talking about, Mitt Romney from day one, John McCain, Lindsey Graham, these guys have just gone way over the line in trying to promote this thing into the new September 11th attacks. And it's just atrocious. And I think in a very strange way, the Bush administration, or, the Bush administration in retrospect, they benefited from just the scope of the tragedy, right? In a way that the Obama administration is now being attacked. That's not to diminish the loss of these 4 Americans and the Libyans who also were killed at the same time, but just the fact that it's not as clearly as catastrophic an attack as 9/11 was, I think, and maybe it's just something in the nature of Republicans anyway, but they're going all out. And I'm sure the fact that it came a couple months before an election played a part too. Just the way they've gone all out with this it seems to me just crazy.
Well, there is, and I think that, and obviously, one of these is a rhetorical trope, and so just isn't, on the same level as people actually dying in Benghazi. But I think that you have sort of, within the current generation, with the generation of conservatives right now, there is, it seems like there's almost a physical revulsion against the notion that Democrats can do anything useful about national security. And this really sort of came through in the debates where, I think that where Barack Obama made entirely reasonable and appropriate amount of fun about Mitt Romney's ridiculous "the Navy is smaller than 1917" comments, right?
Yeah.
With sort of an entirely reasonable, horses and bayonets, right, aren't the most relevant military equipment either, and so we shouldn't talk about it. We should have a more rational appreciation of defense, and sort of instead of taking their lumps on a punch that was telegraphed for weeks and that Romney should have known not to go, because seriously, I'm sure that John Kerry came back with the 1970 line at least 75 times in debate prep. They felt the need. No, bayonets are really important. We have evidence that the British Army killed a guy with a bayonet in 2004. And hey, Marines use lots of bayonets right now, and so bayonets are important. Maybe horses maybe not. But they were important in World War II. And just the inability to take their lumps on this issue, right? But they have to come back. No, you don't understand how important bayonets are because you're a Democrat. You're a Democrat. And this Benghazi thing sort of plays out in much the same way, right? That it fits into this narrative that has been they've so comfortably had, right? It fits into a narrative they've constructed, and even though the magnitude of it is, despite the tragedy, so far less than what happened on September 11th, the magnitude of any mistakes are so much less than, say, invading Iraq, for example. It becomes the most critical national security failure, and I would say since Vietnam, but of course Vietnam was a good thing. So, since Thomas Jefferson failed to destroy, the Sultanate of Morocco or something, and that I think is this. It seems like a generational thing, right? And that people just not appreciating that Democrats can do and talk national security. And so you have to almost gin up and throw together something that is vastly so horrible, and you have to talk about it as so horrible so that people will believe, even though on its face it's just pretty absurd.
No, in terms of no, I agree. That's my sense, too. There is such a level of cognitive dissonance on the part of conservatives who've been free to make these kinds of arguments for so long, without even thinking about them, that you can see them actually becoming physically angry. Like McCain has gone so far around the bend on this stuff that when Colin Powell endorsed Obama, he criticized Colin Powell for getting us into Iraq. Did you see this at all? He criticized Colin Powell for the UN presentation that got us into Iraq. There's no way to satirize that. There's nothing I can say that will make that any funnier, right?
The ongoing death of satire. Oh my goodness. Oh, that's just pretty hilarious. I did like his joke. McCain did tell a joke about that, sort of what he personally intercepted a surface-to-air missile over Vietnam with his plane. That was actually a pretty funny joke from my point of view.
No, McCain can tell funny jokes.
Was, but yeah. But so before we go, and I don't follow this issue nearly as closely as you have, but how have I followed it a little bit earlier in the year when it sort of really appeared that Bibi was going all in for Romney. How have, to your sense, how have the ups and downs of the past few weeks, where once again it appeared that Romney had a much better chance, and now maybe that chance is slightly deteriorating. Do you have any sense of how that's playing out in terms of Israeli and Palestinian politics? Sort of whether actors are sort of hedging or making different arguments or whatever about. Oh, and by the way, we should comment on the Niall Ferguson article suggesting that Obama is going to bomb Iran by Monday. And my comment is I think Dan Dresser said it's the worst column he's ever read, and he's read a lot of bad columns. But
no, yeah, that's really it's bad even for Niall Ferguson. But let's also mention that Daniel Pipes made this exact argument about 2 years ago. So that's where Niall Ferguson is getting this stuff now. Right. That's just so stupid. I don't think it even bears, except as a comment on Newsweek, Daily Beast, and what what's become of it.
Right.
On Israel, no, I think you saw well, the Palestinians, it's easy. I think the Palestinians have no optimism whatsoever that even if Obama wins, he will engage the issue in any serious way. If there's change, I mean, my sense is, they haven't completely written him off, but it's very close. And if there's any positive movement on the issue from their point of view, and I say the Palestinians, but I should talk about Fatah here. We can get to Hamas in a minute. As far as a two-state solution, any movement on that is going to come from sources other than the United States, which is to say there's not going to be very much happening.
Right.
Now, I'm a little bit more optimistic. I wouldn't say I'm super optimistic, but I would put it about a little bit better than 50% that I think Obama is going to re-engage on this. I think he does understand that we are really, people keep talking about the end of the two-state solution, but I think this really is it. And over to the Israeli side, and I do want to just get back and talk quickly about the Emir of Qatar's visit to Gaza, which I think is significant. But on the Israeli side, I think you've got Ehud Barak, who, interestingly, earlier this week, made a statement about, we see the Iranians have now they've converted a good amount of their 20% enriched uranium into place for their research reactor. Well, we knew that in August. So this is not new information. What is new is that Barak is now distancing himself more from Bibi Netanyahu and saying things that the current administration likes. Again, I think there are others who can comment on what this actually means in terms of Israeli politics much better than I can. But we have elections coming up, and it's who knows what the political future of Ehud Barak is. He has a party that's him and like 5 other people. As far as I can tell, they don't even have an actual party infrastructure. So, and then of course you've got Bibi Netanyahu forming a new party, combining his Likud party with the Israel Beitenu party of Avigdor Lieberman, which is just a straight ultra-nationalist, racist, anti-Arab party, which is not great for peace.
Right.
So that's what's happening there. Now, in terms of the U.S. election, I think it's as I saw it, Bibi went all in against Obama's re-election the moment he lectured the President of the United States in the Oval Office in May 2011 in that fashion. I mean, I think that's the moment when he just went all in. Now, what's interesting is I'm not sure, it really comes, I've heard from a lot of people that Netanyahu is concerned about what the president might do if and when he's reelected. So I find it very interesting that he's concerned, considering the lack of real pressure that the U.S. has put on Israel during the Obama term. So I guess we'll see. Now, just quickly getting to Gaza before we finish up. I mean, this is something I have been watching for a while. The continuing division, even though they take Fatah and Hamas seem to every few months seem to take one step forward and then two steps away from reconciliation. For the Emir of Qatar being a very, very interesting player in the Middle East right now, supporting, using their wealth to make friends all over the place, for him to go there, and, his physical presence being, a clear recognition of Hamas's rule over the Gaza Strip, further cementing, I don't think you can come to any other conclusion except that it further cements the division between between Hamas and Fatah in the West Bank. And again, not great for a two-state solution to have the Palestinian movement so divided between two groups claiming to speak for it. So what we've got right now is, in reality, is a 1.5-state solution with Hamas controlling Gaza and Israel controlling Israel and continuing to militarily occupy and create settlements in the West Bank, with the Palestinians living under a government in which they have absolutely no say.
Right. I mean, that's an interesting way of phrasing it, right? That you in some ways have a de facto state in Gaza and you don't in the West Bank at all, right? Which is still under complete sort of Israeli military administration. Right. No, yeah. I mean, you obviously know more about the subject, but my sense is very similar to yours, that we are unlikely to see any. I mean, you would like some sort of, you would like to imagine, and I'm sure some people would like to imagine some sort of, no, Bibi, fuck off Obama, but just sort of in revenge. But that doesn't happen in the context of American politics, right? It's not
Right.
it's not an outcome that is imaginable, and so we have sort of going forward. We have the same, basically the same what we've had before. So.
Yeah.
All right. Well, listen. This is going to be posted, and maybe on Wednesday, people will be pointing and gawking at this. Conservatives will be saying, "Look at those two morons who thought Obama was going to win. They're obviously stupid." Maybe
If Obama wins, they will say, "Look at those two morons." Just in general.
What I want them to say is, "Look at this." When Farley and Duss went on Foreign Entanglements, and they said they thought that Obama could win, that he would win, that he was likely to win, that tipped the election right there. That tipped the election. It depressed conservative turnout in key states with our massive Ohio viewership.
That's right.
And just it flipped the election right there. And I want people to believe that because, frankly, that would be awesome for me if people believed that I could flip presidential elections. So, that would go straight into the tenure file. So, all right. Well, thank you, viewers, and thank you, Matt, and we'll be in touch soon.
All right. Talk to you later.
All right. Bye.